Again, thank you for staying with us. That's, of course, our next conversation this morning. And Dr. Vincent Maduka joins us this morning. He is a former Director General of the NTA. He joins us virtually. Thank you for joining us this morning. Well, somehow, why do I feel this must be something very cheering and joyous for you personally, being a former DG of the NTA?
Indeed, it is. As was pointed out at the event itself, the attempt to establish a society like this has been mooted several years ago. And it might be a form of name dropping, but I recall that at the earliest time when this society was first mooted, there were people like I think Stella Bassi, there was Eno Iruku of the FRCN. I think it was NDC then, maybe FRCN. FRCN came into being about 1977 or thereabouts. So for Rich to have hung in the limbo for so long is something that we're glad to see off and running now.
Well, in the registration in 1994 is something that we cannot, of course, remonstrate. I mean, it's something that you know very well. But 1994 till now, it's a very long time away. And the first set of people, of members, are just being inducted, with you being one of them. One wonders, what, in your opinion, could be responsible or could have been responsible for that long limbo, as you put it, and how do we ascertain sustainability this time around?
Well, maybe we learned our lesson. A difficulty that's inherent in a society like this is that it's composed of very many different professions. And if the members of those other professions are quite happy and merry in their other callings, a society like this latest one might suffer a bit. You're going to find there are engineers in this group who belong to active professional bodies, and they're probably quite happy to go along without driving for the takeoff of this one. I'm just suggesting a possible reason. The other people there who are really first-line broadcasters, because I've been inaugurated into society, but I consider there are people who are exclusively broadcasters in their profession, that is their skills and their means of livelihood. And some other people, maybe accountants, maybe engineers like me. And so just for the records, I'm not a doctor yet. There's still time, but I'm an engineer. I'm referring to the title against my name. Okay. So I don't deceive you.
Okay, so that brings me to the next question. Let's talk about regulation now. For the accountants, they have ANAN. For the doctors, they have the NBA. For the lawyers, they have the doctors have NMA rather, and the lawyers have the MBA. And I imagine you cannot be a member of the Nigeria Bar Association without having studied law. But you find that in broadcasting, you find a lot of people who have other callings or other first degrees who are practicing as broadcasters. So what, in the future, after this inauguration, what would regulation be like if you were to become a member of the SNB? What would the requirement be in terms of your first degree? And would the SNB be making recommendations to broadcasting organizations in terms of those they should recruit? You know, I want you to speak in that regard.
Yes, the first thing is to be quite clear. There are distinctive skills and standards to be achieved in broadcasting. There's always the element of popularity or audience acceptance in the case of front-end broadcasters. These are presenters, newscasters, reporters, and so on. Those who actually stand in front of the cameras and are recognized by the audience. Now, those people have one major skill, and that is communication, either through video or through sound or both combined. There are others who are contributing skills that are different. You mentioned the accountants and engineers, for example. Now, in order for you to be a distinctive professional, as distinct from an amateur, you need to have certain recognized skills. And recognized means that somebody has examined you and found you suitable for that skill that you are claiming. The skill here is one of communication and authority. Now, you can communicate falsehood, you can communicate jokes as a comedian, an entertainer, simply, a singer. And you are doing so in front of the camera, and maybe you are doing it over and over. And I wouldn't call you a broadcaster. I would say you are a broadcaster when you communicate and you do so with authority, which means that your listener goes away with some new knowledge. So whether you are making a presentation written by somebody else, or you are presenting what you wrote yourself, or you are in fact reporting an event, I need to be able to take you seriously, that you are an authority, and that what you are saying is, I can take to the bank. And also the element of the ethics. Ethics means that there are certain rules in the business which you are obliged to respect for you to remain a recognized practitioner. So what are the qualifications that you need? I think basically in this country today, a university degree is not a terribly difficult thing to obtain. And I think it should be a basic qualification for any incoming person. Those who have acquired the skills through doing the work, what you call on-the-job trainees, will be required, in my view, to have done so at certain prescribed levels for so many years. For newcomers, I would say that a degree in perhaps just any discipline, because when you broadcast, you are not restricted to certain disciplines only.
Okay.
You will pass on information on a whole variety of subjects. And therefore, I wouldn't say that a degree in physics would not be acceptable for you to be a member of the Society of Broadcasters, Nigerian Broadcasters. On the other hand, you must also have skills acquired through broadcasting.
Okay, let me quickly get this one in before I throw it to my colleague Maupe. Some years back, when I was listening to a commentary on the Nigerian broadcasting space, the analyst talked about how it felt like he was in Manhattan in the United States of America because of the diction of most of the presenters, the prevalent number of presenters that he heard on radio. And that brings us to this talk about the British RP, which we are trained with from the Nigerian Broadcast Academy, the old Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria training school. So I wonder if the SNB would be involved in regulation to this extent in terms of what the house style should be in most broadcasting houses. What should it be? Should it be the British RP, or should we just yawn and go back to sleep as having welcomed those who predominantly have American accents on our radio stations and in our broadcast television houses?
You cannot prescribe a rule in my view. In Nigeria, we're supposed, and we evaluate the quality of our English in the expression Queen's English. Now, when I studied in the UK, even my colleagues said I spoke better Queen's English than themselves. Now, what you call better there is very relative. But the point here is that every language is also localized. You have Scottish accent in English, and in Scotland, I believe 90% of the broadcasters there would employ the Scottish accent. You have Irish accent, you have Australian accent, you have the London accent, which they call Cockney. I lived in Yorkshire, which had a distinctive accent. And I'll say every one of these was acceptable. However, the BBC on its external broadcast tended to employ Queen's English because that was standard written and taught English. So if you ask what we should do in Nigeria, I think that we should adopt Queen's English. We should demand proper pronunciation of English words. I don't think we should allow a broadcaster, professional broadcaster, who makes a living broadcasting other than entertaining in terms of comedy, to come on air and say things like chief or chief. So when you ask the question, what should be the standard? I think the standard should be written English that is backed with authority. That means when you open a reference book on how to speak English, the book is authoritative. Now, I'm not the one who should be talking about this because there are many aspects to broadcasting, and speech is only one of them. I mean, it's a key one because we are communicating. But I'm not an authority.
Okay, I sincerely hope that the train hasn't left the station on that one. I mean, because we now have stations which broadcast in Pidgin English and cater to that demographic. Interestingly, I think quite a number of people enjoy the stations which also broadcast in Pidgin English. So it's going to be an interesting mix. What I'm interested to know is how we intend to make sure that this is attractive, because at the end of the day, much as, yes, standards and rules are very important, even regulation as well, populating this association and making sure that, you know, the target audience, which are broadcasters in general, you know, see this as their own and run with it and make it a success, as we've seen other associations or other associations do, will be primary. So how do we intend to ensure that the association attracts younger people, people who are coming into the industry, and even people who maybe did not know about it before now, but will think this is a bright idea and would like to be members?
I think simply that every professional body must have what is standard there. If you are talking of Pidgin as a language or means of communication, it has its own grammar, it has its own syntax, and I don't think that Queen's English would be acceptable in a Pidgin program. So that's the point, that there are rules, there are standards. There will be standards for Pidgin English. There will be standards for, I mean, you can't speak Yoruba with an Igbo accent, for instance, and say because it's a Yoruba program, anything goes. No, it has its own grammar, it has its own pronunciation rules. And so the point I'm making is that there should be one standard in one particular definition of a means of communication. Call it Pidgin, call it standard English in Nigeria, but whatever it is, you have to have a skill in that area, if that is the area you are specializing in. I don't think we should be afraid and call bad English, good English, or bad pidgin, good pidgin, or bad Yoruba, good Yoruba. So each means of communication, each medium, in what we're trying to do with a professional society is that there are acceptable skills and standards which must be attained for you to be recognized as a professional member of that organization or that society. So there's not going to be one rule that says, for instance, that you must not speak in a certain way. But if you are going to speak a certain language or a certain mode of communication, whether it's sign language or otherwise, you must be skilled in it and you must show proficiency in it for you to attain the standard that the society will be asking for. So I think, in fact, it's fundamental to this question of being a professional body. Professional body is a society that has rules, skills, and ethics which its members must subscribe to.
Asked Engineer Maduka is the acceptability of it, making it attractive to younger broadcasters today. If you can do that within 30 seconds, sir.
Making it attractive is that it's a paying profession, one, which I'm afraid is not so to a large extent today. Two, that it is peopled, populated by bright people, bright practitioners, whom younger people want to emulate and want to copy. You study medicine because it pays and because in society it is looked up to. So broadcasters, like in America, should be able to earn. It should be a very competitive industry. When we say people want to go into it, they have to be competent to go into it. You don't go there simply because you like the profession. If you like the profession, then you go through what it requires. The training, the skills, the experience, and the level of what I call wisdom, because there's always going to be an occasion when what you learned at school is not going to be useful. And then at that point, you delve into your experience, your wisdom, call it that. And also the profession is recognized and respected. I mean, in the past, when your son was playing football, instead of preparing for tomorrow's lesson, you beat him up for missing the point about education. Oh, you're not supposed to be playing, you're supposed to be reading. I hear today some parents tell the boys, stop reading, get out and go and kick the ball. There's money in that fact. So for people to want to be broadcasters, they need to be attracted by what they see and what they know will be the benefit. And I think for a long time, people went into broadcasting because they loved it. And I think that's a very good thing.
Yeah.
We also want it to pay. And that's what all of us should try to work at.
Well, Engineer Maduka, there are so many questions to ask you, one of which would be, I mean, those who are saying, comparing Society of Nigerian Broadcasters with the functions of the NBC and all of that, but then we're completely out of time. We'll not be able to take that on, perhaps some other time. We have to thank you so much for being a part of our conversation this morning and throwing light on the Society of Nigerian Broadcasters. Engineer Vincent Maduka is a former DG of the NTA and SNB inductee. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you very much.